Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to HK Cheating Stories. We appreciate each and every one of you joining us. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's get the story started. My name is Mark Reynolds, and for the past 10 years, I believed I had the perfect marriage. I had a beautiful home, a stable job, and a wife I adored, or so I thought. But everything changed the night I came home early from a business trip. A single pack of matches, something so small, so insignificant, became the thread that unraveled my entire world. Lies, secrets, betrayal right inside my own home. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was there, staring me in the face. And once I opened that door, there was no turning back. This is my story. I never thought betrayal would come wrapped in something so small, so ordinary. A matchbook? Cheap, flimsy, the kind people pick up at bars and toss into drawers, forgotten. But this one wouldn't be forgotten. It was late, past midnight, when I found it. I had just come home from another exhausting business trip, eager to see Susan, my wife of nearly 10 years. She was already asleep, curled under the covers, looking so peaceful. I almost felt guilty for the thoughts creeping into my head. Almost. I had seen something before I even stepped into our bedroom. A faint smell, something unfamiliar. It wasn't perfume, not hers anyway. It was mixed with candle wax, something burnt. That's when I saw them. 5 tiny, charred matchsticks sitting on the bathroom sink. My stomach twisted. I wasn't the paranoid type, but something about them felt off. I reached out and ran my fingers over the blackened tips. They were damp, like someone had doused them under running water before throwing them away. I followed my instincts, scanning the counter, the shelves, until I found it. A plain, white matchbook lying next to a few scented candles. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. Bright pink writing stretched across the cover, elegant, deliberate. The Wildcat Lounge. I frowned. The name meant nothing to me. I didn't smoke. Susan didn't either. So why was it here? I flipped it open. 35 matches. 5 were missing. The number seemed insignificant, but something about it gnawed at me. I wasn't sure why I even counted them. Maybe because my gut was telling me this was more than just a forgotten trinket from a night out with friends. I stepped back into the bedroom, matchbook in hand, watching Susan as she slept. I told myself I was overthinking. Maybe she picked it up somewhere randomly. Maybe a coworker gave it to her. But the way my chest tightened told me otherwise. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the ceiling. My job in IT had taught me one thing: signs matter. Small errors lead to big problems. And when something doesn't add up, there's always a reason. The next morning, as Susan moved around the kitchen, making coffee like any other day, I decided to test the waters. "Hey, Susan," I said casually, leaning against the counter, the matchbook resting between my fingers. "Ever heard of the Wildcat Lounge?" For a second, just a second, her hands froze over the coffee pot. It was subtle, but I caught it. She quickly recovered, forcing a small laugh. "The Wildcat Lounge. No, what?" I lifted the matchbook. "Found this in the bathroom. Thought maybe it was yours." Her eyes flicked to it, and something flashed across her face, too quick to catch. Then she shrugged. "Huh, no idea. Maybe I picked it up somewhere and forgot." That was it. No curiosity, no follow-up questions. Just a quick brush off. A cold sensation crawled up my spine. I wanted to believe her, to dismiss my suspicions as baseless. But something wasn't right. People forget business cards, receipts, maybe even lipsticks. But matchbooks? From bars they don't remember? I forced a smile. Yeah, must be nothing. I let it go for now. But inside, my mind was already working. That night, I searched online for the Wildcat Lounge. Nothing came up in any official directories. No website, no Facebook page, no reviews. But after a little digging, I found a mention of it on an obscure nightlife forum. Exclusive bar for older women and younger men. Discreet location. Invite only. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Older women. Younger men. Susan's words from the kitchen replayed in my head. Huh. No idea. Maybe I picked it up somewhere and forgot. I closed my laptop and clenched my fists. I wasn't overthinking. I wasn't imagining things. Something was very, very wrong. And I was going to find out what. I couldn't shake the feeling. The matchbook, Susan's reaction, the Wildcat Lounge. It all kept playing in my mind like a puzzle missing just one piece. A piece I knew I needed to find. The next day, I boarded my usual flight to Colorado Springs, just like I did every month for work. It was supposed to be routine. Get in, do my job, come back. But this time, I couldn't focus. My mind kept drifting back to Susan, to the way she hesitated before answering me, to the way she barely reacted when I showed her the matchbook. By the time I checked into my hotel, I had convinced myself I was being ridiculous. Maybe she really did just pick it up somewhere. Maybe I was letting my imagination get the best of me. That night, at exactly 9:20 p.m., I did what I always did when I was away. I called home. Susan always answered on the second ring. Always. It was our thing. No matter how busy she was, no matter what was happening, she'd pick up. But this time, the phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then it went to voicemail. I stared at my phone, frowning. That wasn't like her. I called again. Same result. A tight knot formed in my stomach. I tried to shake it off. Maybe she was in the shower. Maybe she left her phone in another room. There had to be an explanation. I left a message. Hey, Susan. Just checking in. Call me back when you get this. I set my phone down and turned on the TV, flipping through channels absent-mindedly. I tried to focus on the game, but my eyes kept darting back to the phone on the nightstand. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Nothing. By now, my instincts were screaming. I had spent years troubleshooting problems in my job, identifying patterns, catching small errors before they turned into disasters. And this was a red flag. I checked the clock, 9:45 p.m. I called again. Still no answer. I sat there, gripping my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. A dozen thoughts raced through my head. Was she asleep already? Unlikely. Was she out? If so, where? With who? I forced myself to take a deep breath. This was crazy. I was acting crazy. I needed to stop. So I did. I put the phone down. I grabbed the remote. I tried to lose myself in the game. And then, at exactly 10:07 p.m., my phone buzzed. A message. Hey babe. Sorry, I didn't hear the phone. Long day at work. Just relaxing now. Hope you had a good flight. Love you. I read it twice. Then a third time. It was normal. Too normal. Too perfect. The kind of message someone sends when they want to reassure you. When they want to make sure you don't ask any more questions. I stared at the words, my pulse quickening. Didn't hear the phone. Bullshit. Susan always had her phone on her. Always. I had seen her answer calls in the middle of folding laundry, in the shower, even half asleep. She never missed my calls. Until now. I started typing, no worries. What are you up to? Then I stopped. I didn't want to tip her off. If she was hiding something, pushing too hard would only make her more careful. Instead, I deleted my message and sent, love you too. Talk tomorrow. I set my phone down and exhaled slowly. She didn't pick up for nearly an hour. She gave me a vague excuse. And yet, I was supposed to believe nothing was wrong. I turned off the TV, staring at the dark screen. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew one thing for sure. Susan was lying to me. The next morning, I woke up with a dull ache in my chest, the kind that lingers after a night of bad dreams. Except this wasn't a dream. Susan's unanswered call, her too perfect text, the matchbook, the Wildcat Lounge. It all stacked up like evidence in a case I didn't want to be building. I went through the motions of my day, meetings, emails, troubleshooting network issues, but my mind was somewhere else. By lunchtime, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know where that matchbook came from. So I asked around. It started casually. A group of us were in the break room. The usual crew, 4 guys, 2 women. We were talking about places to go out in Colorado Springs when I slipped in the question. Hey, any of you ever heard of a place called the Wildcat Lounge? Silence. A couple of them shook their heads. One guy furrowed his brow. Nope. What? I shrugged, playing it off. Found a matchbook from there at home. Never heard of it. That should have been the end of it. But then, Jason. Jason was the youngest guy in our department, fresh out of college, always quick with a joke. He had been stirring sugar into his coffee, but at my words, his hand stopped. Then, he smirked. Oh, that place. He chuckled, shaking his head. Damn, Mark, I didn't know you had it in you. My stomach dropped. I forced a laugh. What do you mean? Jason leaned against the counter, stirring his coffee again, clearly enjoying himself. The Wildcat Lounge. It's a special kind of place. Special how? Dude, he said, lowering his voice. It's a bar where older women go to pick up younger guys. The room around me blurred. My grip on my coffee cup tightened. What? I asked, even though I'd heard him perfectly. Yeah, man. Cougars and cubs, you know. Jason grinned. Rich ladies in their 30s, 40s, even 50s, looking for young guys to entertain them. Total sugar mama vibes. I stared at him, my pulse pounding in my ears. You've been there? Jason chuckled, sipping his coffee. A few times. Back in college, some of my buddies and I checked it out. Place is super low-key, no signs, no website. If you don't know about it, you don't find it. My throat felt tight. And the women? All kinds, Jason said, shrugging. Some single, some divorced, and some? Yeah, they're married. They don't exactly advertise it, but you can tell. Wedding rings coming off in the parking lot, that kind of thing. I swallowed hard. Where is it? Jason hesitated, then shrugged. East side. Off Indian Ripple Road, past 675. You'd never notice it unless you were looking for it. That was all I needed to hear. I forced a laugh, pretending to be amused. Huh, didn't think places like that actually existed. Oh, they do, Jason said with a wink. Trust me. I nodded, finishing my coffee with a steady hand. But inside, I was falling apart. I barely remember the rest of the workday. Meetings blurred together. Emails sat unanswered. My fingers hovered over my keyboard, but I couldn't type. All I could see was Susan. Susan, brushing off my question about the matchbook. Susan, hesitating before answering me. Susan, not picking up my call. Susan, at the Wildcat Lounge. The thought made my stomach churn. When my shift ended, I drove straight back to my hotel. I didn't even stop for dinner. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I pulled out my laptop and started digging. Jason was right. The place was nearly invisible online. No website, no social media. Just a handful of mentions on underground nightlife forums. I scrolled through comments from men who had been there, their words making my blood run cold. Best place for older ladies who know what they want. Met a woman there who told me she was married. Said she just needed something different. Most of them take you home the same night. No strings attached. A wave of nausea hit me. I clenched my jaw, my hands gripping the laptop so hard I thought I might crack the casing. No, this doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean Susan was there. It doesn't mean she cheated. But the matchbook in my bathroom said otherwise. And I wasn't about to ignore it. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Susan. About the life we built. About whether any of it had been real. And for the first time in our marriage, I realized something terrifying. I couldn't trust my wife. And I had to find out the truth. I couldn't shake the unease gripping my chest. My mind wouldn't let go of the image of Susan, standing in front of a mirror, buttoning up a blouse, removing her wedding ring before stepping into a dimly lit bar filled with hungry, young men. It was just a theory. A paranoid, awful theory. But it was one I couldn't ignore. By Friday, my work in Colorado Springs was wrapped up, and my flight home was earlier than usual. Normally, I'd be getting in around 10 p.m., just enough time to shower and crawl into bed beside my wife. But this time, my flight had been rescheduled. I'd be home 3 hours earlier. Susan didn't know that. That thought had lodged itself in my brain since Wednesday. I hadn't mentioned the change. She was expecting me at 10. I had 3 whole hours where she wouldn't be watching her back. If there was something to catch, now was my chance. By the time my plane touched down in Dayton, my heart was hammering in my chest. I barely noticed the other passengers grabbing their luggage or shuffling off the plane. My focus was singular, getting home. I moved fast. No checked bags. No delays. I was in my car within minutes, pulling onto the highway, heading home. The drive was too quiet. The familiar route, the same exits, the same highway lights flashing past my windshield, but everything felt different. Wrong. By the time I turned onto our street, my palms were slick with sweat. I pulled into the driveway, cutting the engine. Susan's car was there. Good. But something else was there too. Another car. A sleek, black sports car I had never seen before. I went still. Who the hell did that belong to? The engine was off. The car looked parked with purpose. Someone was inside my house. My stomach twisted violently. I sat in my car for a moment, breathing hard, trying to control the surge of rage clawing its way up my throat. My head was buzzing, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly I thought the leather might tear. This was it. This was the moment. I stepped out of my car as quietly as possible, taking slow, measured steps up the driveway. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I reached the front door. It was unlocked. I didn't push it open right away. Instead, I stood there for a second, listening. Voices. Muffled low. A man's voice. A woman's voice. Susan's voice. I pushed the door open just enough to slip inside. The house was dimly lit, the glow from the living room spilling into the hallway. I moved forward, careful, silent. Then I saw them. Susan, standing in the living room. And across from her, a man. A young man. He was laughing, leaning against the back of my couch like he belonged there. He was tall, broad-shouldered, maybe mid-20s. Casual but confident, wearing a fitted button-down, a cocky smirk on his face. And Susan? She was wearing that dress. The black one. The one she only pulled out on special occasions. It clung to her, highlighting every curve, the neckline lower than I remembered. She wasn't standing far away from him. Not far enough. Rage boiled in my gut. I took a step forward. The wooden floor creaked under my weight. Susan turned. Her face drained of color. Her eyes widened, mouth parting slightly as if she had just seen a ghost. I let the silence hang for a second. Then I spoke. Who the hell is this? The young man's smirk faltered. He straightened slightly, eyes darting between me and Susan. Susan opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Mark, you're home early. I ignored her. My eyes were locked onto him. I'll ask again, I said, voice low, controlled, dangerous. Who the hell are you? The guy finally spoke, his voice smooth, too smooth. Relax, man. I'm just a friend. A friend. A fucking friend. I took another step forward. Friend. I repeated, my voice sharper now. What kind of friend shows up at my house when my wife thinks I'm out of town? He didn't answer. Neither did Susan. I turned to her now, my hands clenched at my sides. Explain. Her lips trembled. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. She swallowed hard, glancing at the man, her panic obvious. She was scrambling, trying to think of a way out of this. But there was no way out. I had caught her. The matchbook. The unanswered call. The Wildcat Lounge. And now this. Susan stood there, exposed, cornered. And I had never been so sure of anything in my life. She was cheating on me. And this was only the beginning. I stood there, heart pounding, hands clenched into fists at my sides. The air in the room was thick, suffocating. Susan's face was frozen in panic. The young man, whoever the hell he was, had the nerve to look amused, as if he'd found himself in some ridiculous sitcom instead of another man's home, alone with another man's wife. Mark? Susan finally breathed, forcing a nervous smile. It's not what it looks like. Not what it looked like. That was the best she could come up with. I let out a slow, humorless chuckle. Oh, so explain it to me, Susan. What exactly am I looking at? Her eyes darted between me and the young guy, her fingers gripping the hem of that damn black dress, like she could somehow make herself smaller, less guilty. This is Jake, she said, her voice shaking. He's a co-worker, Mark. He needed help with something. I cut her off with a sharp laugh. A co-worker? I repeated, eyes burning into hers. You work at a furniture store, Susan. What exactly does he need help with? Assembling a bed in our living room. Jake, if that was even his real name, cleared his throat and straightened up, trying to regain his cocky posture. Look, man, he started, hands raised like he was trying to calm a wild animal. I think maybe I should go. I turned on him so fast his smirk finally dropped. Damn right you should go. My voice was low, controlled, lethal. Jake hesitated, glancing at Susan as if expecting her to say something. Maybe to defend him, to beg me to understand. But Susan said nothing. She just stood there. And that told me everything I needed to know. The silence stretched, thick and unbearable. Then, Jake grabbed his coat from the back of the couch and made his way toward the door. I stepped aside, giving him just enough space to pass. He kept his head down, but right as he reached the threshold, I leaned in close and whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. Run fast, kid, and don't ever come back. He practically bolted. The second the door slammed shut, I turned back to Susan. She was staring at the floor, her breathing shallow. She wouldn't even look at me. How long? My voice was cold, distant. She flinched. Mark, please. How long? Her lips trembled. She ran a shaky hand through her hair, blinking rapidly like she could force back the panic in her eyes. It was nothing, she whispered. It was just a mistake. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. A mistake. I repeated. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk from the grocery store, Susan. Bringing another man into our home? That's a choice. Her chest rose and fell in rapid, uneven breaths. Mark, I swear, it wasn't what you think. I cut her off with a sharp, humorless laugh. You really think I'm that stupid? She blinked, her lips parting slightly. I leaned in, my voice dropping into a dangerous whisper. I called you last night. Twice. Her eyes widened just a fraction. You didn't answer. And when you finally texted back, you told me you didn't hear the phone. I let the words sink in, watching her squirm. Except we both know that's a lie, don't we? She swallowed hard. And then there's this, I said, reaching into my pocket. I pulled out the matchbook and held it between us. Her face drained of color. I saw the exact moment she realized she was trapped. Remember this? I asked, voice laced with venom. You told me you didn't know where it came from. I let out a slow, deliberate breath. But now, I know exactly where it's from. Silence. She just stood there, blinking back tears, lips pressed together in a desperate attempt to hold herself together. So, tell me, Susan. I continued, stepping even closer. Were you at the Wildcat Lounge last night? Her whole body stiffened. For a split second, she considered lying again. I saw it. The hesitation, the desperate flicker in her eyes, the way she opened her mouth only to close it again. Then, finally, she broke. Her shoulders slumped. Her breath shuddered out. And in the weakest, most pathetic voice I had ever heard, she whispered, yes. A single word. But it hit me like a sledgehammer. I clenched my jaw, staring at the woman I had shared a life with for 10 years. A woman who had just admitted, finally, that she had been lying to me, that she had betrayed me, that I was right. And now, I had to decide what to do about it. The word hung in the air between us like a bomb waiting to explode. Yes, Susan had finally admitted it. My wife, the woman I had trusted, the woman I had built a life with, had lied to my face for God knows how long. And now, she stood there, looking at me with wide, glassy eyes, waiting for my reaction, waiting for me to explode, to yell, to throw something. But I didn't. I just stood still, staring at her. And the silence? It was worse than any screaming could have been. She shifted uncomfortably, wrapping her arms around herself. Mark, she swallowed hard, her voice cracking. It didn't mean anything. I let out a slow breath. Didn't mean anything? I repeated, my voice disturbingly calm. You mean to tell me that sneaking out behind my back, lying to my face, bringing some punk into my house, our house, was just meaningless? She flinched like I had struck her. I made a mistake, she whispered. It wasn't planned. I swear it just happened. Bullshit. Susan inhaled sharply. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Mistakes don't just happen, Susan. You made choices. First, you went to that bar. Then, you picked someone out. Then, you let him into our home. That's not a mistake. That's deliberate. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She had no defense. She knew it. I knew it. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. How many times? She looked up at me, eyes glistening with unshed tears. What? How? Many times. My voice was ice. Don't lie to me, Susan. Not anymore. Her hands trembled. Her breath hitched. Guilt dripped off of her like sweat. She hesitated, just for a second. And in that second, I knew. Jesus Christ. I muttered, running a hand through my hair. It wasn't just once. It wasn't just Jake. There were others. I felt something inside me snap. Susan must have seen it. The change in my expression, the shift in my energy, because suddenly, she was rushing toward me, hands outstretched, voice panicked. Mark, please. It's over, okay? I ended it. It didn't mean anything. I love you. I stepped back before she could touch me. Don't. She froze. You don't get to say that to me. Not after this. Her face crumpled, a sob escaping her lips. I'll do anything, Mark. Anything. Please don't leave me. And there it was. She wasn't sorry she cheated. She was sorry she got caught. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. I wasn't done yet. You'll do anything? I asked, my voice eerily composed. She nodded frantically. Yes. Anything. Good. I said, turning toward the kitchen. She hesitated before following me, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. What are you doing? I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into the kitchen drawer and pulled out my phone. Her eyes darted to it, panic flickering across her face. Mark. I held up a hand, silencing her. Then, I swiped through my phone, tapping the screen until I found exactly what I was looking for. The security camera footage. the footage she didn't know existed. Susan sucked in a sharp breath as I placed the phone on the kitchen counter and hit play. The video started rolling. There she was, standing in the living room, wearing that damn black dress, smiling, flirting with Jake, her face drained of color. She reached for the phone, but I snatched it away before she could touch it. "Nope," I said coldly. "You wanted me to believe it was just a mistake, right? That it didn't mean anything? Then explain this." Her mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. Then, the video skipped forward. The moment she kissed him. The moment she let him undo her blouse. The moment she led him upstairs. Tears streamed down her face now, her whole body shaking. "Please," she whispered. I ignored her. I kept watching. The moment she and Jake entered our bedroom. That was when I finally stopped the video. I picked up my phone and locked the screen. Then, I looked at Susan. She was a mess. Crying, shaking, breaking. But I felt nothing. No sadness. No heartbreak. Just cold, unfiltered rage. I leaned in, speaking so quietly she had to hold her breath just to hear me. "You want to know the difference between you and me, Susan?" She barely nodded. I smiled, slow and deliberate. "You got caught. Asterisk." I stepped back, grabbing my jacket. "And now, it's my turn." I walked toward the door, leaving her standing there, sobbing. Because Susan had no idea. The game had only just begun. I walked out of the house, leaving Susan behind in her sea of tears and panic. But I didn't feel relief. Not yet. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I got into my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart was pounding, not with sadness, not even with betrayal anymore. No, now there was only one thing fueling me. Revenge. Susan thought she could lie to me. Thought she could walk all over me and then beg for forgiveness when she got caught. She had no idea what was coming. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself as I drove away. I had work to do, plans to set in motion. The next morning, I sat across from my attorney, a man named Daniel Carter. A no-nonsense, ruthless kind of guy, the kind of lawyer you'd want when you're ready to destroy someone. "You've got proof?" he asked, leaning forward. I slid my phone across the table. "Everything you need." He picked it up, pressed play, and watched in silence as the disgusting truth unfolded on screen. When the footage ended, he let out a low whistle. "Well," he said, sitting back, "that's about as airtight as it gets. You want to go for the kill?" "I want her to walk away with nothing," I said coldly. "No house, no money, no sympathy." Daniel nodded, a smirk playing on his lips. "I can make that happen." That afternoon, I paid a visit to the Montgomery County Health Department. The receptionist barely looked up as I approached. "Can I help you?" I put on my best concerned husband act, sighing deeply. "Yeah, I've got a question. My wife, she's been acting strange. And, well, I found out she's been going to this place, the Wildcat Lounge. Ever heard of it?" The woman's face shifted immediately. "You said the Wildcat?" "Bingo." She exchanged a glance with the man sitting behind her before turning back to me. "Sir, I can't discuss details, but I'd strongly suggest you and your wife get tested." I forced my expression into one of shock. "Tested? Wait, what are you saying?" She hesitated, then sighed. "There have been some cases linked to that establishment." My stomach twisted, but not from fear. From satisfaction. Because this was exactly what I needed. I thanked her, grabbed the pamphlet she handed me, and walked out, pulling out my phone the second I got into my car. I had a letter to write. The next day, I made sure Susan received the letter. It was sitting on the kitchen table when she walked in from work, still wearing that fake mask of normalcy, like she could pretend everything was fine. She spotted the envelope immediately. "What's this?" she asked, picking it up. "Read it." She hesitated, then tore it open. I watched as her eyes scanned the words, her face slowly draining of color. The letter was designed to look official, with a Montgomery County Health Department header and an urgent warning about a recent outbreak traced back to the Wildcat Lounge. By the time she reached the last sentence, her hands were shaking. "Mark," she whispered. "What is this?" "You tell me," I said coolly, crossing my arms. "Since you're the one who was there." Her breath hitched. She looked up at me, eyes filled with pure, unfiltered terror. You think I have something?" she stammered. I didn't answer. I just let the silence sink into her bones. She started breathing faster, gripping the letter like it was a death sentence. "Oh my God." Her voice was barely a whisper. I watched her crumble. watched her mind race with panic. She was thinking about every single man she had been with, about what they might have given her, about what she might have given me. Good. She deserved every second of that fear. She dropped into a chair, clutching her head. She was unraveling. Mark, she whimpered. I need to get tested. I leaned down, my voice low and sharp. Yes, Susan. You do. She broke into a sob, burying her face in her hands. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. Susan sat at the table, her whole body trembling as she clutched the letter in her shaking hands. Terror dripped from her face. Her breathing was uneven, her mind racing with panic. I could see it, see her calculating, piecing everything together, realizing that she might have just destroyed herself in more ways than one. And I let her sit with that fear. I let it fester. I wanted her to feel every ounce of the dread that had consumed me for weeks. Mark, she finally choked out, barely able to look at me. I need to go to the doctor. I need to get tested. You should have thought of that before you crawled into bed with those boys, Susan. Her eyes snapped up, wide and full of desperation. Please, save it. I cut her off, my voice ice cold. She flinched. She knew that this was it. I turned away from her, walking toward my office. I had one more play to make. When I came back, I had the papers in my hands. I dropped them onto the table in front of her. The sound made her jump. What's this? She whispered, even though she already knew. Your freedom, I said flatly. Her hands hovered over the papers, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Mark, we can fix this. I almost laughed. Fix this. I repeated. You think there's anything left to fix? Her lips parted, but she had nothing to say. She knew the answer. You didn't just betray me, Susan. You betrayed our home, our marriage, our life. I exhaled sharply. You invited him into our bed. You lied to my face. And now, you're only scared because you might have caught something. She looked away, shame burning across her face. Sign the papers, I told her. She hesitated, her fingers brushing the edge of the document. What if I don't? I smiled, because I was ready for that. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and held it up. Her breath hitched. Then I make sure everyone sees this, I said, tapping the screen. The video was right there, waiting to be played. The footage of her and Jake. And Earl. And God knows who else. Her mouth dropped open in horror. You wouldn't, she whispered. I tilted my head. Wouldn't I? She swallowed hard, glancing between me and the phone. Mark, please. My parents, my job. Then sign. Her hands trembled as she grabbed the pen. And in that moment, I saw it, the realization finally sinking in. She was losing everything. She had spent months sneaking around, thinking she was in control, thinking she could juggle me and her affairs without consequence. She was wrong. I watched as she scribbled her name at the bottom of the page. When she was done, she set the pen down and looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. What happens now? She whispered. I picked up the papers, glancing at her signature. It was done. I shoved them into my briefcase and met her eyes. Now, I said, standing up. Now you get out. Her face twisted in shock. What? I talked to a lawyer, I said smoothly. The house is in my name. You have no claim to it. Pack your things and go. She was shaking now. Mark, I don't have anywhere to. Not my problem. I turned and walked away, heading for the stairs. Behind me, I heard her sobbing, begging. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Because I was done. 2 weeks later, Susan was gone. She had moved in with Denise, her partner in crime, the one who had helped ruin our marriage. I didn't care. I had my house, my freedom, and more importantly, I had my revenge. Word had spread. The fake health department letter did its job. The Wildcat Lounge. Ruined. The college guys who spent their nights chasing older women. Paranoid. And Susan. Her name was whispered in hushed tones among friends and co-workers. She was a joke. I didn't feel bad. Not for a second. Because for the first time in months, I could breathe. I could wake up without that suffocating weight of betrayal crushing me. And as I sat on my back porch, sipping a beer, watching the sun set, I realized something. I won. Looking back at everything that happened, I realized that life isn't always fair, but how we choose to face it determines everything. Betrayal can break you, but it also gives you the chance to see who truly deserves a place in your life. I once loved, once trusted, but in the end, my blind faith led me to bitter pain. The biggest lesson I've learned? Always stay clear-headed in love. Don't let emotions cloud your judgment. A strong relationship isn't just built on feelings. It requires honesty, respect, and commitment. If someone betrays you once, chances are they'll do it again. Don't wait to forgive just because you're afraid of being alone. I also understand now that no one is worth losing yourself over. No matter how deep the pain, you have to stand up, be strong, and move forward. Always know your own worth and what you deserve. If someone doesn't respect you, don't waste time holding on to them. In the end, life is a series of choices. Choose peace. Choose self-respect. And most importantly, choose yourself.